Welcome to Family Addiction Coaching, a podcast about families supporting a loved one with addiction. Each episode will provide insight into a real family's experience, what families find useful and not, what is available in the community, and what would help make their journey easier. Similar to what happens in our coaching service, we'll discuss how families have encouraged their loved one into recovery, as well as their own family recovery. We'll also discuss harm reduction, an especially useful approach for those with no current interest in recovery. I'm your host, Patrick Doyle of Family Addiction Coaching. With a master's degree in social work, I'm licensed by the state of Massachusetts and comply with the strict code of ethics of the National Association of Social Workers. My sincere thanks and deepest appreciation to the guests of this episode of Family Addiction Coaching Podcast. In order to protect the privacy of everyone involved, we are not using their real names. Joe and Lynn are a married couple who have used my coaching services, which allows you to get their experience and to get a deep understanding of the ways that families can benefit. Lynn was the driving force who was able to get a large extended family group together in supporting their loved one, who is Joe's sister, named Jennifer, a woman aged 50 years old who started developing concerns about her alcohol use. Once again, I want to thank you so much for disclosing your journey and sharing with us how things have gone for you over the past few months. Thanks so much for agreeing to be here.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Now, for most families who request coaching, there has been a serious incident telling them that there's a big problem. Can you give us a brief summary of your loved one's pattern of substance use and the types of problems that develop?
I think it's helpful to understand maybe a little bit about our family history, and I'll try to keep it brief here. We come from a family where I would say it's a six-pack Joe type of experience where drinking a six-pack on a Monday night after a hard day of work is pretty common. And at family events, alcohol was always a big part of our social elements to every holiday gathering that we had together. So to the extent that my sister's drinking to us didn't necessarily seem out of hand. I'd say starting about 2 years ago, there were a couple episodes where she'd get very drunk in events and you kind of dismiss it. And then about 18 months ago, her husband started mentioning, Jennifer's starting to drink a lot. And he would say that occasionally. She's drinking a lot more than normal, but none of us really thought much of it until it all came to a head early this year where she started acting a little more erratic, was telling us she was going to file for a divorce. And then we were together. One small alarm was we were together and we were hanging out during this whole divorce sequence. And she said, boy, I could really use a drink. And so I gave her some wine that I would have at my house and didn't think much on it at the time. But now you see the bigger pattern. And I don't think that's one of the issues. We didn't recognize the pattern until it was very obvious to the family overall. It really occurred in a attempted suicide that really raised the alarm bells for all of us. And then from that, the series of events that we're going to get into happened from that starting point. So she hit it very well. And Jennifer is a very persuasive and talented, professionally successful woman. We just didn't see it.
And that's often the way that it goes. I recall when we first made contact, Joe and Lynn, you both felt a very strong need to help Joe's sister, Jennifer. Can you describe your reactions, thoughts, and emotions, what it felt like, and the impact the substance use problem had on you and your family?
I mean, I guess we're both fortunate enough to never had to have dealt with addiction before. And so I remember, I'm the kind of personality that I'm a problem solver. And so this was just a new problem to solve. So I just, got online and started researching like crazy, listening to podcasts, looking for help, right? Like there must be some way to fix this, to help her. I think probably like my best education about this was from TV and movies. I mean, really, it's going to be a journey, but really had no idea. I remember kind of the pattern of my husband's family is they're a bit conflict avoidant. And so this was something really difficult because one of, their sister was in crisis, their daughter, and they had a really hard time just kind of dealing with that. And so there was a lot of avoidance by the core family, the blood relatives. And so it was really myself and my other sister-in-law, who's married to one of the brothers. She's kind of in the medical field, and we just went to work. But I remember feeling just exhausted, just thirsty for information, just looking everywhere, spending hours, feeling like I can help, and this family needs the help because my husband, his brothers, certainly my sister-in-law, who we saw was really in crisis, and my in-laws just were not capable. We're not capable of leaning into that work. And I think, I don't know, I would say, Joe, that you were dealing with your own, feelings about it. And so I think that took up all of your extra energy and time of just trying to handle what was happening with your sister.
Yeah, I mean, the second there, I would say that I felt paralyzed in some ways, not knowing where to go, frustrated with the healthcare system in the United States around the lack of information and help that we were getting when she did first get admitted for this. And it was paralyzing to me versus, Lynn, your experience, which was just to go all in on it. And it was obsessive, and it put a lot of stress on you, put a lot of stress on me. And I know my sister-in-law, who was also heavily involved in it, and her husband, it greatly impacted them and their marriage. Right. And it's a challenge, and it puts stress on, obviously on Jennifer, and her husband and their two kids, but our whole extended family that were heavily involved, and also our kids, right? They were feeling the impact of this as well. So, Patrick, I think one of the things you brought up to us at one time is that addiction impacts the entire family, and it hurts a lot of people. And that is something that always stuck with me that I'll never forget. It truly is, a whole global event for our family, and it's recovery for all of us.
That was new information for you at the time.
It was 100% new information to me. I didn't appreciate it.
Did you find that the impact on you, once you realized that this was a serious problem, did you find that it impacted maybe how you could work, like your concentration, your sleep, your energy level, anything like that?
I probably, you said I was obsessive. I probably was obsessive. I mean, I work full time. We have 3 kids, we're busy people. But yes, every free moment literally brushing my teeth, I'd be listening to a podcast about addiction. Or divorce,
oh, wow.
Trying to help with divorce. Luckily, I'm a pretty good sleeper, but yes, I think it was a very stressful time. It was very heavy. It put stress on us. It put individually and on our relationship, where I was frustrated that some of the family members weren't leaning in more, that, my husband wasn't leaning in more. He, was would get frustrated with me because I'm pushing him and, come listen to this with me, or come talk to, my sister-in-law. We're going to talk about what's going on. And he could only handle that for, 15, 20 minutes. And we'd be talking literally, we would talk for 2-3 hours, a couple times a week. That was very normal back then. So it was all consuming for me.
Yeah. Patrick, I think you can appreciate, I didn't necessarily need to stick on a call for 3 hours for women going back and forth, trying to solve the world's problems.
That's how we process.
But that's how, and that's part of the learning process. I think it absolutely impacted me and my job, and I had to be pretty open with some of my coworkers. And as far as, we're at a family, I just called it a family crisis. And and people were very understanding with that. I think my stress level, we're in a COVID period too, but I don't necessarily know how much that would add to it. But I started developing a tic, like a stress tic, that I didn't necessarily understand at the time until she started getting help. And finally I lost the tic. Right. But then
oh, really?
Yeah. So
wow.
High elements of stress again, if there's knock on wood, she doesn't, her recovery goes well. But if we have a really hard conversation, it comes back, and I have to be cognizant of it.
I saw you doing it as we were starting this discussion.
Yeah, so,
oh, wow.
Not to pull that hair off my face is ultimately what I was doing. It is a lovely, lovely experience. But it's been really rough. Definitely the hardest thing. And I think, Lynn, you would say the same, the hardest thing in our lives.
Yeah.
We hear so much about young people with substance use problems. We don't really hear much about 50-year-old women, successful professionals having an addiction problem, and then the impact that puts onto their family and on the extended family. You won't see that on the after-school special or the movie of the week about addiction generally.
No.
And I think that's what made it all the more jarring for us. I mean, like you said, she's a beautiful, successful, just beloved person within our family and in the community. And I still can't believe, it's been eight months now, I guess, since it all started. Some days I still wake up and I can't believe what's happened with her life and how fast her life has spun out of control. And, like Joe was saying, you realize, you start to look back and you start to, as we've been talking to her husband more and her more, you start to see like, oh, this has actually been something she's been struggling with for years. And, not just the alcohol, but other things in her life. And she was holding it together somehow until she couldn't. It's shocking because you can't, believe it. And it was just the beginning of 2020. Everything was great. Great job, great family, great kids, great, so it did feel like it came out of the blue because we didn't see it. And she covered it up really well.
Yeah, she did an amazing job covering it up. And I brought up the suicide attempt earlier, and I feel like I should, preface that a little bit why, or at least that's my perception, why my sister did that. It was more a cry for help at that point. But in a very short period of time, she started to lose her marriage. She had racked up a significant amount of financial debt. Her relationships with her daughters, she has 2 teenage daughters, was in a troubled patch for her. And I think she was just the mountain or the weight, everything came upon her. And also the charade or the facade that she had that to the whole family that everything is great. She's got this ideal life, and that's all fell apart. And so I think that really put her eventually in a complete downward spiral. And there's a lot to that, but those are some of the bigger points that the alcoholism really just, at age 50, it just reaches a peak and can tear a person down to the lowest level.
After your initial free coaching session, can you describe, Lynn, you were the one who drove this process. Can you describe how you decided to use my services initially, and then the decision-making process of when we would have our next contact?
Yes, I was driving the bus for a lot of it, but
you were
back up.
You were the point person, and you did a great job. People will hear during the rest of the episode. You did an amazing job. You drove it. You were the driver, and yet you also had a lot of other very compassionate, empathic adults very much involved with you too. It was such a team effort. I've never really witnessed anything quite like it before.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that there were a lot of people involved. That Joe comes from, there's 4 kids. He's the youngest. His sister is the second oldest. And it's a close family. We all live within 40 minutes of each other. And, we get together many times a year. We used to get together more when our kids were younger. So, and his sister lives next door to his parents, right? It's a very close-knit family.
Yeah.
And so
that's close.
Yes. Everybody loves Raymond close.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We felt, I don't think we had any other option but to try to get everyone aligned. We actually, before we sought you out, my sister-in-law, we were starting to get really worried about her behavior. It was clear that she was drinking a lot. She was drinking and driving. She went into a 1-week detox. And she came out of that and seemed really good for a couple of weeks. And then she just started to go downhill. And so we first met with an interventionist company that didn't, told us about how you do an intervention and what that would be like and what to expect. And I would say half of our group was worried enough about her that we said, yeah, let's do it. And the other half said, no, this isn't the right thing. I mentioned it's a family that avoids conflict and has a hard time talking about difficult things. So an intervention is pretty much everyone's worst nightmare.
Right.
So,
right.
I think we backed off from that. We said, okay, there's got to be other options besides doing an intervention. And so Allies in Recovery is one of the websites that I found that I really liked. And I liked, the care approach of, it was more about supporting and encouraging, positive behaviors and, just encouraging when they're doing things that are healthy. And so I found your name through that. And I think we did have that initial conversation. We were looking at other, therapists, addiction therapists, family therapists. We looked at a couple others and just thought, a couple of us that were driving the bus together thought you were our best option because you really could help us guide through, just all the different treatment options and, just the course of this disease and what we might see or all of the curveballs we knew that might be coming. But it did take some time. And I think there was disagreement among the group of us on kind of what should be done. And I think between the time that you and I first talked, my brother-in-law really thought AA could help her and had found a sponsor for her and had done all this legwork for her, in retrospect, that was not really, there's a lot of stuff we all did that was really, he was doing what he thought was best for her at the time. And so kind of pursuing that, we were going down lots of different roads. And I think when we came back to you, things had really gotten to a scary point where we literally were in fear for her life. And we just kind of, AA hadn't worked, she went to one meeting and that's it. Yeah. And so we were really, I think everyone in the family at that point was like, okay, this cannot go on. We have to do something. We're all ready to come to the table and do whatever needs to be done to, really help get her to safety.
Yeah. I recall you had done an incredible amount of research looking into all different types of options, which is great. That's a good thing to do.
And I think it took time for different family members to come to terms with, they may need to have a pushback on her or have difficult conversations. We didn't know how to have difficult conversations at that time. We were all on our own different kind of journey with this in our own recovery, as you've taught us, in our own recovery of what's right for each of us. And so when you have 9 adults doing that, it took some time to align on that. And it took seeing very clearly that she was not going to be able to help herself out of it. And she was going to need our support to do that.
Well, and
9 adults is a lot. 9 adults is a lot. And
Patrick, I think you may have mentioned it. I can't remember. It's all the people we're talking, but I mean, the person with addiction is masterful at turning us against each other, putting doubt or planting a seed of doubt in someone's mind. So to take a drastic measure, all she really needed to do was convince one or two of us that then would talk on the side with someone else and convince someone else. So it was a challenge and very frustrating because, Lynn and I may have been very absolute about one direction, but, trying to be collaborative in our family. If someone else had an opinion, we try to be respectful of that. And so it definitely made the journey a little bit longer, but I think still a part of the journey that we needed to take.
It also illustrates the difference between parents having a 20-year-old child with an addiction problem versus when the person with the addiction is 50 years old. I mean, there's nobody who's really the boss of her, as opposed to, if your 20-year-old child, you're kind of the boss of your 20-year-old child. It's not as clear cut. I think that had a lot to do with it. And as you mentioned, she was having marital difficulties.
I mean, that was a huge complication because her husband and her were starting to talk about divorce. And so there was the husband would say, hey, I found, a bunch of White Claw in her car. And you would question, is he, is that true? Is it not? She said she's not drinking, right? I mean, there were
right.
different feelings about how truthful her husband was or not. And it just, divorce is probably hard enough without having to deal with alcohol addiction. And so it made everything, it was just, it took a lot for us, even for myself, although I would say Joe and I, were earlier to see the real problem with her drinking. But even for us, it was like peeling back an onion. You're like, okay, this is a husband problem. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's, an alcohol problem. And then we find out, there was trauma, childhood trauma and family trauma. There was a lot to work through and a lot of trying to get to the truth and what was really happening. And she wanted none of us to see any of it. She just did everything she could to try to hide, and still does to some extent.
Right. That's what addiction does to the person. It impairs their judgment, and it's kind of like a virus, and it takes over the body and it takes over the mind, and it changes that person. At this point, your 50-year-old sister was not the same woman that she was 10 years ago.
Oh, God.
And that's what it does. Yeah, it changes behavior. You can hardly recognize the person.
Totally.
Well, I think the recognition part was once it got to a real point. Like I said, we were kind of slow to recognize it, but once you saw it, like when she was in the throes of the heavy drinking and the manipulation and the hiding, it got unfathomable. It got just wild and crazy and shocking and scary. I think that might be the big part of fear and scare. That being fearful that you're going to lose a family member at a very young age, and it got very, very real. And I feel like pretty darn close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably been 3 to 4 near-death experiences. Not even count. She could have driven and hit a tree and killed herself or someone else at any day. But yeah, there were several.
There were 4.
Yeah.
Excluding
really scary.
The drunk driving. That was a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I recall, you threw yourselves into the family coaching when she was in a medical facility, an ICU, having fallen, hit her head while she was extremely intoxicated and had to be brought by ambulance, and she was going through medically supervised withdrawal. I believe that was when you reached out to me again. It was probably a month after our initial consultation. That's when we worked very intensively.
Yeah. That fall, we thought maybe that would be a wake-up call because she was in the ICU. She had bleeding on the brain. She was in the ICU for 4 days. She came out and just started drinking that afternoon. And I think we just all lost it. I think we just lost it in terms of oh my gosh, she's literally going to kill herself. We've got to do something. That weekend, the latter half of that week into the weekend, I was actually at my sister's house. So I was out of town, but my poor sister, we must have spent 12 hours with you, Patrick. I don't know how long you spent. I spent the whole weekend, researching facilities. We were trying to look at options. It was, that was incredibly helpful to have you there to guide us through that. And just, do we take away her keys? Well, she has access to lots of different cars, like what are the things we can do short term? How could we possibly help her decide to go into treatment? And if she doesn't decide to go into treatment, what are we going to do about it as a family?
Right.
And there were some, lots of group conversations, emergency family meetings. We had been meeting as a family on a weekly basis for the couple weeks prior, but it was really a crisis point. So, you asked me how we decided how often, when and how often to meet. I feel like Jennifer decided for us in some respects. We certainly met you frequently when we were in those kinds of crisis moments. And also, I think, fortunately, you talked to her, and by some miracle, she agreed to go to treatment. And so you were then helpful in helping us navigate just how to work with these treatment facilities, what we can expect, like, no, they should have followed up with you by now. It's like entering a foreign country and you have no idea how to speak the language. You have no idea where you should be going, what this should look like. And so you were our translator through all of that.
The patient needs an advocate once they start getting treatment, and the family needs an advocate to interact with the treatment industry, with the treatment programs, the treatment providers. It's impossible to know what is a good quality treatment for the consumers. Asking me to talk with Jennifer directly a couple of times. It was interesting with Jennifer. She was totally uncooperative about most things. She was refusing rehabilitation treatment. And when she got medically stabilized, she was out. She was out of the ICU. She wasn't going to do anything further. She didn't have a problem. Everything was fine, right? In very big, major ways, she was very uncooperative, but in also significant ways, she was quite cooperative. I negotiated with her, well, okay, if you find yourself drinking again, would you then agree to go into a residential rehabilitation program? And she immediately said yes. That was the end of that discussion. So I said, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Let's stay in close contact. And I mean, yeah, I'm helping your family, but I want to be here for you too. The very next day, she ended up calling me and she immediately said, there was no small talk. She said, I want to go into residential and I want to go in now. Can you help us get a good program that I can go into today? She had all of a sudden done a 180-degree about face. I was surprised.
I think we all were. She was...
Well, the walls were coming in on her.
They were. I mean, that she was so vehemently would say, no, you're not. And there's history behind that. I mean, one element that might be interesting for her, there are people listening to us, like her husband would threaten her, like, you're acting crazy, they're going to put you away. So I think this was, giving into that, like, oh, they're going to lock me up. She had fear. She didn't know what was going on either. Much like us, we had no idea what the treatment is for this. It's just very challenging. And it's, I think, Patrick, you brought up one point to us, is like, if she had cancer, there would be a treatment plan. Everyone would be on board. There would be a whole path laid out for you. But with addiction, that just doesn't occur. And there's just a vacuum of information. And so that's where you were extremely helpful in filling in a lot of those gaps, because, making the call on what to do with your older sister is very difficult.
Absolutely. So we've discussed how it was a process for the different family members in this large extended family, 9 people, you mentioned 9 adults, to eventually get on the same page and see the same urgency and the same need to form a unified front and expressing love and concern for Jennifer, with also a consistent message of, Jennifer, we're so afraid that we're going to lose you today. You really do need to take some time off and get this kind of professional help. How can we help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, just like in any family, everyone's relationship is different, and Jennifer has 3 brothers and her relationship with each one is unique. And she's, got a great relationship in many ways with her parents, and a dysfunctional relationship as well, just like probably all of us do, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And throw some addiction in there, and it really starts to strain and show you the shortcomings of those relationships. But it really did, the childhood trauma that was uncovered in this process also, that was a family secret. And so even, Joe learned things about his family and his history that he did not know prior to this. And so there was a lot of, people personally dealing with new information about the family, dealing differently with their sister. Some, one brother was extremely protective of her and just is not someone that's going to really confront her. I don't think any of them are really, but it's just, I think much more wants to just make things nice for her and support her. And there were times when that's really great. And there's times when that isn't as helpful. And so,
Right.
I think everyone dealt with it as best they could. Everyone was hurting. It was tough at first, and I was really frustrated. And my sister-in-law was also frustrated because we felt like we were doing the heavy lifting. But over time, and you helped us with this too, I could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Jennifer's recovery, and it's not really going to help. There are times in crisis when you do need to take action, but there's also a lot that I did that didn't help. I don't think I could have done it any other way for my own learning about this disease and my own recovery. But it was very frustrating. I was frustrated with the family, and it was very healing to start to see, Joe, start to step up to the plate and start to get more hands-on in helping his sister. I mean, he has taken her to the hospital, he and I both, many, many times, seeing her parents, from kind of being pretty avoidant and a little bit defensive to really, saying, yes, whatever therapy is needed, we'll do the therapy, and so over time, it has brought us closer. I've been a member of this family for 25 years. We started dating in high school, and I can say, this has been trial by fire for sure, but I've had more close conversations in the last 10 months than in the prior 24 years. And so it's not necessarily how you want that to happen, but, it's just stuff got real, like we're no longer just talking about football and, planting in the garden. I mean, we're talking about life or death, and it's that is something that I think, is special in its own way.
Lynn may have thought, well, maybe the family is closer in ways, or maybe we're able to have more real conversations than we've ever before. We're definitely not closer as a family.
There's still a lot of strain.
There's a lot of strain that the family's got to go through. And as the first time I saw one of my brothers yesterday in a very long time, I didn't spend much time with him. I didn't necessarily feel like an overt problem seeing him, but I found that I didn't spend much time with him yesterday. So, it'll work its way out, but there's definitely a lot of trauma or issues we all have to work through.
Yeah. There's anger and frustration. And I mean, some of us, people aren't pulling their weight, or, it's very complex. It's very complex.
It's very complex. I think any little thing any problem you had with your child or your sibling as a child, it'll be amplified if you question me on it. We're grown and we're all in our 40s and 50s now, and we're still reverting back to some behaviors when we were children. But it's been it's been a journey.
In some ways, I think you liked when it was just all surface level, whereas
I appreciate surface level.
I like the real stuff.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
I prefer to drink beer and watch football than have real conversations.
Exactly. It's so much more pleasant in a way. I mean, I don't really mean that, audience, but it's comfortable. Yeah, it's comfortable. It's fun. It's the family culture, and all of our families are different to some degree. One thing I do want to add to amplify what you said was learning that a sibling has gone through trauma as a child. Yeah, I mean, learning that at age, 40, 45, whatever, blows a person away. Take us to the moment when you realized that coaching was working to help solve your problem.
It was early on. I think my frustration in the healthcare industry, the addiction industry, was just not knowing, right? I don't know how to make the call. I need someone's guidance and professionalism to help us steer in the right direction, right? Tell us like, hey, you need to act now. Like, this is the moment you need to act. And you were very straightforward on that. So I think the early conversations that you had with us were extremely helpful, because it was an absolute crisis mode, as we described earlier. And then subsequent to that, it was just a continued education, reassurance. We have our Patrick Doyle-isms that we like to say that in our heads to keep, and to me, it was worth every moment we had with you.
Yeah, you were like a lifeline. For me, who was the studious researcher, from the first free consultation, just like, oh my gosh, finally someone who can answer some questions, some burning questions, just help navigate. I mean, certainly I think the broad family saw the value when you helped convince her or help her see for herself that she needed to go to in-treatment therapy. I mean, that was a huge moment for everyone, such a relief. But yeah, it's been, Joe's right. I mean, when you think back to the tornado of what life was like back then, and we would have, maybe a really hard day, or really, where she's in treatment, but she's not really doing the treatment. They're telling us she's not opening up. She's, wants to get out of there in 2 weeks. We would have our Patrick moment in our head of, every day that she's in treatment is a good day. Like today was a good day. As frustrated as we might be by she's not doing recovery the way we'd want her to do recovery, like she's there. She didn't walk out today. And so, you helped us to kind of keep things in perspective and celebrate those milestones and not freak out, when things didn't go the way that we wanted them to go.
And you helped us a couple times. You helped us a couple times. Like, I think you could feel the frustration that Lynn and I had in intense moments. And then, she mentioned she'd get frustrated, and, there was an exchange you and her and I had about her frustration with me. And then you saying, well, that's your issue, Lynn, not Joe's. Like, Joe's trying to do everything. Joe's trying to do everything he's capable of, and you're going at a different path as well. So there are some interesting elements on it too. It was just, I found that stuck out to me as well.
He had your back.
He did have my back.
Well, and
brother had my back.
It's worth mentioning too. Yeah. I mean, I started my own therapy. I've never seen a therapist in my life. I started my own therapy over this because I saw I didn't have a healthy, relationship to what was happening. I was frustrated with my marriage, my husband at times. Yeah. And, our relationship, just was strained. Joe, you started therapy eventually, we're
not a therapy family, Patrick. No, it's really not in our nature to do that.
I know.
Yeah, other members got therapy. Into it as well.
We eventually, came together with family and had, your parents. And I mean, we were seeking help however we could. And I'm someone where it's helpful for me to talk things out. And so it was really helpful to have a therapist that I could go and just talk and get an outside objective perspective, and then not, feel like I have to only get that from you. Also talking to other members of the family, where Joe had a limited patience sometimes for wanting to hash through everything that was happening. So it was really good to have, you and other professionals to help us navigate what was happening, just even with ourselves.
at least half your family just like dove headfirst into therapy for the first time in their lives. And it doesn't usually go like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's pretty unusual.
It was really dark. I mean, that's definitely, I hope my life's never as dark as this. I mean, it was really
it was hard. Yeah.
It's still hard.
Yeah.
It might still
get hard again.
Yeah. I mean, addiction's a journey. And I mean, I pray that Jennifer doesn't drink again, but it's probably not likely. It's probably going to rear its ugly head again. I pray that doesn't, but.
How do you see yourselves now as compared to 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
I do feel like we're in such a healthier place. And, Jennifer's at a sober living facility right now. So we all feel good about that. But also, like Joe said, we're kind of holding our breath and seeing what happens. But I personally feel I have a much healthier ability to cope. And I know that is so because it is not all consuming anymore. It does not take up headspace. I still do listen to, an Al-Anon podcast once in a while. I still, read once in a while. I have my life back. We have time with our kids now that we didn't have, if you would have been talking to us 3 months ago. And I know the boundaries of how much that I can do and where it's helpful, and then things that it's not going to help. And it's up to Jennifer, or it's up to other members. Even some of the controlling that I tried to do early on was with other family members, and that wasn't healthy either. So I just knowing those boundaries, not that I don't slip up once in a while. But I think we've learned. There was an episode probably a month ago where she was drinking and decided to go to the family home, which is about 6 hours away, driving at night. And Joe and I jumped in the car to try to chase her and try to, calling her and trying to convincing her to come home. And, that whole episode ended with her getting lost and finally making her way back home. 1 a.m, we're sitting on her lawn because we were waiting for her. And, after that episode, I think we kind of looked at each other and said, like, okay, that we can't do that again. That we spent 5 hours that night just in a complete panic, driving, just waiting for her. And had we done nothing, it would have been the same outcome probably, And,
right.
And we had to learn that maybe the hard way, but I think we have learned that lesson pretty well at this point.
Yeah. I remember early on when we met, the same questions would come up again and again. And what that said to me, it pointed out how the recovery is a process, and to wrap one's head around these concepts that it's new, it's different information, and it goes against our understanding of addiction. Be angry at the disease. Try not to be angry at the person with the disease.
No, I mean, that was a great point another one of the Patrick Doyle's elements that are getting ingrained into us. You may have had to say it many, many times over to us, but it definitely stuck. And it, we still haven't seen her recently. She's still, in a sober living facility. So it's going to be great to see her in a sober state.
Yeah.
And so we're looking forward to that day and hopefully that happens soon. But yeah, there's probably a person that we don't even know. And because it's been so long, she's been drinking. There's a person in there that we don't even know that well, that we have to, a sober Jennifer is someone I'm looking forward to getting to know more about again, because she's a beautiful, beautiful person.
I mean, I feel like I'm almost a part of your family, having gone through this with you. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you, to help you. And thanks so much for coming and sharing with the audience.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. You've been a blessing to have in our lives.
We'll add you to the Christmas card photo.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Family Addiction Coaching. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the show. We'll continue to interview interesting and strong families as long as there is a need for this information in the community. Make sure to visit our website, www.opioidcoaching.com. If you think you might want professional coaching for yourself or your family, Patrick Doyle is available. Have a peaceful day.